I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you manage all the stuff going on at one time here. I couldn't help but reflecting over the Christmas break on what I was observing you going through in the latter part of last year. You've got an extremely busy burgeoning practice here at Ignite. I know you give a lot of time to the community. You're recruiting an executive director for one of the boards you serve on. How do you keep it all straight? You managed to remain calm, cool, collected, even though you were in early, out late, and I knew you had a lot going on. What's the secret there?
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, I'm happy to say that we did actually manage to hire the ED, so I hope that this stress is going down a little bit. Um,
Congratulations.
but thinking about how to balance the various things. I think one term that we generally read about or hear about is work-life balance, but I don't actually find that a very useful term. I find thinking about how I approach life, which includes professional life and personal life to me, work-life harmony, the striving for harmony, looking at my life, let's say, as a system and not separate parts. So thinking about balance, it kind of has an either or feeling to it. It's either I'm at work or I'm doing this or I'm doing something, that
Okay. Okay.
fills some other need,
Mhm.
versus harmony. I think they're the idea of looking at it more as a system where different parts come together, play together. I find more useful, and it's obviously the striving for balance. It's never the attainment of perfect
Right.
harmony.
Right.
Striving for harmony.
So it sounds like you're taking a more holistic look at work and life rather than trying to take an either or look. With balance, it seems to be either or. And we can never really get here. We're always giving up one for the other. And it sounds like you've really mastered or on the process of mastering the ability to kind of interweave life and work in a much more symphony or harmoniously related relationship rather than choosing black or choosing white. How do
Hmm.
you do that though? What are some of the if there are any things that you actually put in place that help you do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I just want to make really clear that this is an enthusiastic striving for harmony.
Okay.
I think it's important. It's important to keep in mind that I think it's the practice of
Right.
um, that will hopefully get me there. And I think in terms of how I strive for balance, the way how I approach it, like it's a mindset. Just that understanding of thinking about it as a system of interconnected things, that I do maybe need to put in some kind of harmonic balance. But what helps me to do that is actually what we do also here at Ignite, strategic planning. So the thinking about what is most important, coming up with an overarching vision or purpose or whatever language works for each of us, keeping that very very close, being clear on the what I'm striving to achieve, and then out of that, thinking about what are the priorities that I want to achieve. These can include work. These can include personal goals, whatever is most salient at the moment. And maybe that's a good caveat to say as well, that I think this is it's highly personal. However my plan might look like, it's highly personal, it's context specific. It's different now than it was maybe a year ago, it will be in a
Right.
year.
Okay.
And it's agile. And it's so funny because, I mean, of course, that is also what we do here at Ignite, right? And I think a good plan is nothing more than a tool to be saying no to 90% of the things that are, you know, striving for your attention, versus saying an enthusiastic yes to the things that are in line with where you want to put your energy. And then maybe a second piece, just like with organizational plans, I think talking about it, keeping it present, and keeping it in front of you all the time is really important. So in my case, at a personal level, that means, for example, talking about it with my partner a lot, having it up on the kitchen wall so that it's always present, because plans never magically execute themselves. You have to really um, talk about them and make them real.
Mhm. So it sounds like you're on a bit of a continuous improvement striving sort of curve, which we all are. But I also heard you talk a little bit about priorities, being really clear on what those are, a bit about values. And I guess those, if I hear you correctly, kind of form a bit of a structure that you can use as some boundaries as you begin to sort of negotiate the harmony. Instead of going, I must do this now and this later, you're able to sort of manage it all in one cloud, if you will. And then I heard you say share it. So communicate it well with your partner to make sure he is on the same page essentially or understands what you're striving for, I guess are key. Am I kind of in the right ballpark here with some of
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And maybe to be super transparent, the five areas that I think right now are most important in that harmony for me are people and community, very important to me.
right?
Learning,
Okay.
both, as an overarching value. Again, like I don't make the distinction there between personal and professional. Health, just generally striving for health, obviously in a COVID environment, but also just generally, we're all not getting younger, so keeping keeping an eye on that. Making an impact for the better. Again, not making a difference there between work and personal, and
Yeah.
then of course to some extent also paying the bills, and yeah, balancing, kind of striving for harmony between those five priorities.
Yeah.
That is right now what I'm doing.
They sort of form the framework that you have to sort of harmoniously kind of trade off with each other. So how would you say this can apply to a leader and what they're going through right now or maybe going through in 2021? Is there any sort of applicable draw-in we can take to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a useful concept, I think, how we can as leaders approach life right now. As I was saying earlier on, highly context specific.
Mhm.
So trying to see, well, what is most pressing right now, and trying to strive for harmony of the things that are current and most pressing right now. And I think it is such a useful concept because really the starting point is always you. So it's always personal, and it takes as a starting point you and your strengths, your context, your priorities, both at home, at work, and all the other spaces you're part of. And therefore, I think it also, in contrast to a fixed mindset where you see things as finite and or established, let's say the things that you're good at or the things that you're not so good at, I think it allows for a certain growth approach, to embrace a growth approach. And so I think in that sense it's more malleable, and I think viewing one's life in that way is more can be more useful. And then secondly, I think it's also helpful because for me it does connect the dots between strategy and leadership in how we show up, how we choose to show up. And again, it starts with self-reflection, what is most important to me. And I mean, here at Ignite, or I mean, I don't want to say everybody believes this, but I firmly believe it, that strategy and leadership does come from within. We can develop it. And so I think work-life harmony is a really good concept to connect the dots between strategy and leadership in that sense.
Okay. So what I took away from that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we have to be very careful to not expect the endpoint of success right away, but it's really a continuous improvement. You mentioned striving a couple times, moving along, a bit of a pathway to really try to maintain and manage this sort of symphony of different things that are going on at once in our lives, and try to build some harmony using some of the tools and some of the value stakes that you put into the ground, but not to beat ourselves up or have our leadership clients beat themselves up if they can't hit the goal right away. It is really sort of a longer term continuous improvement striving for aspect, and to recognize that it might not be perfect. This is fantastic. I've learned a ton here, and I was really quite curious about how you're managing all these balls, because I knew you had a ton going on, but you managed to really do it so well. I want to give this back to you for the last word. Anything else you'd like to close on in regards to?
No, maybe just to really highlight what you were closing on with is that it's a practice. It's not the journey is the path. And I think that for me jives really well with the idea of leaders leaders are made, they're not born. Nobody gets strategy delivered at any one point. It's you have to work on it, and that is the practice, that is the work. So I think that's maybe my closing comment.
This has been great. Thanks for taking the time. The first week back, I know you've got a lot on your plate. I appreciate you investing some time with me to talk a bit about this today. It's important.
Awesome, thank you.
Cheers.